The book of Acts, chapter 14 and verse 11. And just to have a little setting with this for the couple verses before that, Paul had healed a man that had been crippled for life. And verse 11 says, when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in Lycaonian language, the gods have come down to us in human form. And with that, I will turn the service over to Blain.
Thank you. I'm going to say another prayer real quick before I start the sermon. Lord, thank you so much for a wonderful Sabbath day. With us now as we open up your word. Let your will be done, and let the words be your words, not mine. Your name, amen. I'm going to start with a story first about Jared. Jared was a coal porter. This is back when coal porter, well, we still have coal porters now, but Jared, this has happened many years ago. Jared was coal porting in a city. Not 100% sure which one, but it was a rough area. And he would go door to door, and he was like, God, he would pray for each house. Lord, show me what house I need to go to next. Go to the next one, knock, no one answer. Go to the next one, knock, no one answer. And Jared would get discouraged. And he's like, Lord, I'm doing all I can, doing everything I can. I feel the call to be a coal porter. I feel the call to do in this city. But now what, Lord? Show me where I need to go. And God said, go to the next house. He's like, all right, go to the next house. When Jared knocked on that door, someone opened the door, and they had a gun in their hand. And he said, get in the house. And Jared was like, excuse me? And so then Jared got into the house, and he was being held at gunpoint. And he's like, what do you want? Who are you? What are you doing? He's like, well, and Jared was scared, because who wouldn't be? Being held at gunpoint. He started stammering, I've been selling books. And he's like, he had some books on him, some example books and stuff, because books are heavy. He doesn't have all the width, but he had a couple. And he's like, well, tell me about the books. And so Jared's like, really? Okay. So Jared started going through a spiel about, this is the great controversy. This is Ellen G. White. These are, we have testimony books. And the guy's like, okay, I want all of them. Now, hand them over. So Jared gave him all the books. Now get out. And he left. The guy robbed Jared. Now we'll pick up the rest of the end of the story later at the end of the sermon. I'm going to look at Acts 14. We're going to talk about Paul. So the last two times I preached here, we talked about the conversion of Paul, going to Damascus, or Saul at the time, and then leaving Damascus and his conversion into Paul. Now we're picking up at 14 with Paul and Barnabas again. And chapter 4, Acts 14, verse 1. And we're going to go through probably most of the chapter 14 because it's phenomenal. I'm reading out of the NIV. At Icama, Paul and Barnabas went as usual into the Jewish synagogue. There they spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. But the Jews who refused to believe stirred up the other Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So Paul and Barnabas spent considerable time there, speaking boldly for the Lord, who confirmed their message of his grace by enabling them to perform signs and wonders. The people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews, others with the apostles. There was a plot afoot among the Gentiles and Jews, together with their leaders, to mistreat them and stone them. But they found out about it and fled to Lycaonian and city of Lystra in Derbe, to the surrounding country, where they continued to preach the gospel. So Lystra and Derbe is today modern-day Turkey. I didn't know that. So they're traveling. Damascus is well, they were in Damascus. If you look at a map, so Damascus be over here, and they traveled way up here now. They're it's like they traveled to California from here. I mean, it's a distance. It's not a day journey. this is a travel. And when they're staying at these cities, they are staying a long time. And how messages got back. If they had to reach, like, send message to the apostles back in Jerusalem, it would take a long time. So they are on their own. So we have Barnabas now and Paul, and they're going to these cities. We see them here, and they're doing their best. They're giving it their all. And they stayed there longer preaching, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears, and that happens a lot. We'll continue in verse 8. In Lystra, there sat a man who was lame. He had been that way from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him, saw that he had faith to be healed, and called out, "Stand up on your feet." At that, the man jumped up and began to walk. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in the Lusinian language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates because he and the crowds wanted to sacrifice to them. It's interesting to think about this. So if you actually look up Lystra, now, and the Zeus temple, it's still there. At least part of it is. They found it not that long ago. And so it brings more history into real, that there was a temple there, and this really did happen, that these men who are followers of Christ goes in and proclaims Jesus. They're proclaiming the love, and they're even healing people. And the first thing they go like, well, you must be a god. You must be God in human form. And this does not set right with them at all. Verse 14, we see this. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of this, they tore their clothes and rushed out unto the crowd, shouting, "Friends, why are you doing this? We too are only human, like you. We are bringing you good news, telling you to turn from those worthless things to the living God, who made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them. In the past, he let all nations go their own way. Yet he has not let himself without a testimony. He has shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their season. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your hearts with joy." Even with these words, they had difficulty keeping the crowd from sacrificing to them. I really like this verse because it shows because I know we've talked to non-believers, we've talked to people that are confused or people believe other things, and I really enjoy reading this because it talks about how much God loves. Because even if these people aren't following God, God still loves them so much that He makes sure their bellies are their food and fills your heart with joy. They have rain for their food, and He gives them pleasures, holy pleasures, so they can be happy. Because our God's not a cruel God, and He talks about that He's a loving God, and He truly does love. And then in verse 19, then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul, dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. But after the disciples had gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city. Next day, he and Barnabas left to Derbe. Okay, I wanted to read all that first, and I want to go back, especially this part here. So you have Paul and Barnabas that go into the city, preaching. We have people calling them, well, are you a god? He's like, no, I'm not a god. I'm just a Paul, and that's just a Barnabas. We're just people. That for me? Thank you, yeah. I should have thought of that earlier. Oh, that's better. So I'm just a Paul, and this is a Barnabas. And we just love God. And so he's explaining, and that with this love and all, and the people seeing that Paul, healed this man, they go, well, you definitely have divinity in you, so you have to be, like, in their mind, you have to be Zeus, or you have to be Hermes. At that time in history, basically anywhere in the Mediterranean Sea owned by Rome, the ruling religion was Greek mythology. And there's temples all over the place, and we have a temple of Zeus. And the chief priest of Zeus is coming and like, hey, we want to sacrifice to you. We want to praise you. Now, this never happened to me, but what an interesting situation you find yourself in. Because if this wasn't Barnabas and was not Paul doing this, what would happen? You could become a deity to these people. You could basically rule this area if you wanted to. But they don't, obviously. They go, no, we are not worthy. We are not God. And they tear their clothes. And then the crowd turns on them so fast, it seems like. After they say, no, our God, this loves you so much that he's still providing for you. And we see a lot of this. The Jews are the ones that are like, kill these people. And I think this is the most craziest thing, because we see the Jews are so mad at the Christians that they're siding with the Zeus believers, the Greek mythology believers. They're not trying to convert them to Judaism. They're just trying to hate the Christians. So we have a mutual hate on Christians. Let's just kill them. Because every time Barnabas and Paul have problems, it's because the Jews are showing up talking bad about them to the Gentiles who believe in Greek mythology. I just think they have so much hate in their heart at that time against Christians, it blinds them from anything positive. And we see this with Paul. So when Paul and Barnabas I'd imagine they're being chased in verse 19 there, being stoned, because stoning is a very brutal thing. And we see Paul and Barnabas, they're running. At least I have to imagine that'd be happening if someone's chasing me, because they don't get Barnabas, they get Paul. So I'm guessing they try to get both of them, and Barnabas is able to get away. And they grab Paul, and they dragged him. And it's only 2 verses here, but they're very powerful verses, because that's not a thing that happens fast. This is Paul's life. If I was Paul, what would I be thinking? You're being captured. You got caught by an angry crowd, and you're being dragged outside the city. I'm pretty sure he probably tried to fight it, and it didn't work. And he's probably praying, God, please help me, because that's what I'd be praying. God, I'm about to die. I've seen a stoning. He witnessed stoning of Stephen. Maybe he thought he deserved it. I don't know. But if I was Paul, I would be very scared. And so he would take it out. Even if you have the glory of God, it's going to hurt, because it's a rock, a lot of rocks. So they take Paul outside the city, and they just start wailing on him. And I talked about this in a previous sermon, how this a couple years previous, when Jesus was around, they kill somebody was very, very hard. They couldn't do it. They couldn't just kill somebody like that. They killed Jesus. They needed false accusations. They needed false testimonies, and that still didn't work. Pilate saw right through all that, and they just let it happen. But to kill somebody, it took court hearings, it took procedures, it took, an angry mob and paying a lot of people off, and that was a short. That wasn't that long ago, and now we have, I don't like this person, let me drag them out and just kill them. It's like the wild west. It's the rules are. It's Christian hunting time, and that's what actually is happening. The Jews can just do that. So we see that now. They take him out there, they pick up rocks, and they start killing Paul. And they think they killed Paul. And Paul probably thought he was about to die, because it's gruesome. I would say that much. I don't get too much detail, but it's pretty gruesome, stoning. And he must have been covered in bruises and blood than to think he was dead to stop. Because why would you stop? We just keep going until you were 100% sure. But the crowd assumed that he was dead and left. And then what about Barnabas? What was he thinking? Like, oh no, I let my friend down. What did I do wrong? Was he scared? Probably. They probably got separated. And then it talks about But after the disciples had gathered around him, so all the disciples, they're coming out of the city after the crowd left. We don't know how long after, it doesn't say. But they get there and they see a bloody, broken Paul. A dead Paul. They're all standing around him. They're probably thinking to themselves, oh no, they got Paul. And then Paul starts getting up, starts moving, starts twitching. And it must have been a miracle in itself that he didn't get brain damage or he didn't have vital injuries. But he gets up and goes back into the city. Same place, the same people that killed him or thought they killed him. And I just love that part of the story, that it's so quick, it's so easy to pass over. But the fact that Paul died, he actually died, but died, at least the people in the city. And later on, when they return, a little bit later, they do leave there, and then they come back later on. And when they come back, people are like, hey, that's that dead guy. And they go like, we messed up. And the church, they're able to plant a church there. But it's not, it takes a long time. I mean, Barnabas and Paul, they go through a lot. They get very little, it seems like. Yeah. Now I'll talk about Jared again. I want to talk about Jared because I love the story about Jared, about the colporteur Jared. He reminds me of Paul in a lot of ways. We see Jared, like I said before, went with his books and got robbed at gunpoint in a house, left all his books behind. After that, Jared got very discouraged, and he hated God for a long time because he was like, God, why would you put me in that situation? Why would you put me in a situation where I could be at gunpoint, where my life was at risk? And he started to resent God. But he's like, I don't know. He wrestled with God a lot because he was called to call porter. He was called to do that, called to that ministry, called to be a call porter, called to do this, called to do that. And he did everything that God told him to do, and his reward was being robbed. And he was so discouraged. And Jared left the church for a while. And then Jared met a Seventh Adventist woman, and they got married, and she brought him back to the church. He's like, okay, but he was never fully sold on it again. He just went for her. We hear that a lot, actually, a lot of stories like that usually the man goes back for the wife. But Jared, one Sabbath, there's a very special speaker speaking, giving a testimony. He's sitting there, he's listening, and the speaker, he starts talking about a story about how he was wrapped up in drugs. He was a gang leader. That his life, he thought he ruled the streets. He had money in piles in the back room. He loved his life as this gang leader, but he wasn't fulfilled. It was always, every day he thought it was going to be his last day, and he just that was enough for him. And there was a fight happening with another gang, and so he was always carrying his peace on him. And a knock happened at his door, and he thought it was the other gang, dropping off a bomb or just antagonizing them, like, ha, we're on your turf. And he opened the door, and it was some guy with books. And he thought it was a trap. He thought it was the gang setting in a decoy or something. He didn't know what it was. He's like, who's this guy? He's wearing nice clothes. He has a bunch of books. Who cares? But he wanted to test him out, so he brought him inside. And this guy, giving his testimony, said, I held this poor man at gunpoint. I told him, because he wanted to make sure he was really a salesman for books. They give him the whole spiel. So the guy started telling the spiel. As you know, this is Jared. And Jared's sitting there listening. He's like, hey, I'm that guy in this story. And he started realizing that what happened to him meant something. And the testimony goes on with the guy, holding this Jared at gunpoint and giving the spiel. And the gang leader goes, okay, but still wasn't 100% convinced he wasn't, a bad, wasn't the other gang. So he said, leave all your books and get out of here. Because he didn't want to kill him. He didn't want that blood on his hands just in case it wasn't. But you can't be too careful. So he wanted, just in case there was a gun in those books, and that's what he was asking him, show me everything. He wanted to make sure there was nothing fishy. So he robbed the coal porter because he wanted to make sure there was nothing fishy in those books. Nothing fishy. So that's he started going through the books, making sure they're real books, they're real Christian books. He started reading them because he had nothing else to do except waiting to be killed as he guarded his territory. And slowly he kept reading the books and reading the books, and he realized, there's something else to live for besides me. And that guy became an Adventist. I'm not sure what happened from being in that house waiting for, to getting out. But we know that he got out, and he left everything behind, and he got out that life. And he became, I think, a public speaker, talking about anti-drugs, and it was for gang stuff. But he was an Adventist, and that day he was at church, and Jared was there, and everyone was leaving, thanking him for your testimony, and Jared just got in the line to thank him too. And when they locked eyes, the guy just grabbed Jared and started hugging him and started crying, saying, "Thank you, Jared." Well, thank you, it was Jared. "Thank you so much. I'm so sorry what I did to you, but thank you so much." And Jared just grabbed him too. He's like, "Thank you, because I thought God just wanted to torture me, and I never thought that my encounter with you would lead to this." And that guy, he was able to go out and tell the testimony all over the place, and he helped a lot of people get out of that kind of lifestyle because of Jared's encouragement. And Jared's all because Jared was told to go to that next house, do coal portery. Jared had no idea what was going to happen, but God did. And I think about what Paul didn't know was going to happen. Paul did his best. He was out there, he was preaching, and what did they do? They killed him. He didn't actually die, but they didn't know that. They thought they killed him. And, that must be the most discouraging thing. I could feel that with Jared and with Paul, going out there, doing your best, and feeling that God just let you down. But in reality, he didn't. You just don't see the big picture. And I pray my own self that I don't get discouraged like Jared did. Because sometimes, even when a ministry happens and it seems like nothing came of it, something always comes of it, even if you don't know what it is. We might not know until heaven, until you find out, that one ministry you guys did, and you're like, that one that failed? Oh yeah, that one thing you said that one time in that one meeting we had, that resonated with me for life, and I kept that and because of that, I came back to the church years later. And I just want to closing, I just want you to think about that. Just because it seems like a failure doesn't mean it's a failure. Lord, thank you so much for a wonderful Sabbath day. Lord, be with us now as we go from here, as we partake in this wonderful Sabbath day. Thank you for blessing and providing. In your name, amen.